Ethan Pierce had everything: money, power, and a reckless arrogance that made him believe he could do anything without consequences. So when his friends dared him to marry the ugliest beggar he could find for $1 million bet, he accepted without hesitation. It was just a game to him, a way to prove that wealth could turn even the most ridiculous situations into entertainment. But on their wedding night, as his new wife stepped out of the bathroom, Ethan's world flipped upside down. Gone was the frail, dirty woman he had mocked. In her place stood someone unrecognizable, stunning, confident, and hiding a secret that would shatter his ego forever. That night, Ethan learned the hard way that some bets cost more than money. The grand chandelier above cast golden reflections across the lavish bedroom, a space fit for royalty. Ethan Pierce, a self-made millionaire, lounged on a velvet armchair, twirling a glass of whiskey in his hand. The smirk on his face hadn't faded since the wedding ceremony that morning. The event had been nothing short of a spectacle, filled with whispers and judgmental stares. After all, Ethan, one of the most eligible bachelors in the city, had just married an ugly, homeless woman. It had started as a joke, a drunken bet among his rich, arrogant friends. Marry the ugliest woman you can find, and we'll each wire you $1 million, one of them had challenged. Ethan had laughed at the ridiculousness of it, but the more he thought about it, the more amusing it became. What did he have to lose? A marriage of convenience wasn't uncommon among the wealthy, and with the right legal documents, an annulment would be effortless. And so, just a week later, he found her Lena. She had been sitting on the sidewalk, wearing tattered clothes, her hair a matted mess. Her face was covered in grime, her body frail from hunger. The moment he saw her, he knew she was perfect for his little stunt. Without hesitation, he had proposed. The look of disbelief on her face had been priceless. He had expected her to jump at the offer, desperate for a way out of her misery, but she had hesitated. "Why would a man like you marry someone like me?" she had asked. "Because I can," Ethan had replied smugly. "And because I want to." Her eyes had searched his, as if trying to read the truth behind his words. But in the end, she had agreed. She had nothing to lose after all. The wedding was a grand affair, held at an exclusive venue, with hundreds of guests dressed in their finest attire. And in the midst of it all, there was Lena, standing awkwardly in a dress that barely fit her malnourished frame. She had looked nervous, her hands trembling as she signed the marriage certificate. Ethan had smirked the entire time, barely able to contain his amusement. Now, as he sat in their honeymoon suite, he waited for her to emerge from the bathroom. He took another sip of his whiskey, thinking about how he would celebrate with his friends tomorrow. The money would be in his account by morning. The door creaked open, and Lena stepped out, her posture hesitant. Ethan glanced at her briefly, before returning his gaze to his drink. But something made him look again. His smirk faded. The woman standing before him was nothing like the one he had married that morning. Gone were the rags, the dirt, the tangled mess of hair. In their place stood a breathtakingly beautiful woman. Her hair, now long and glossy, cascaded down her back. Her eyes, once dull and lifeless, shone like rare gemstones. Her skin, once hidden beneath grime, was flawless. She stood with an air of quiet confidence, her presence almost regal. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. His mind struggled to process what he was seeing. What is this?" he stammered. Lena smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "You never asked who I was, Ethan. You only saw what you wanted to see." He felt a chill run down his spine. "Who are you?" She took a step closer. "I am Lena Lancaster, daughter of Richard Lancaster, founder of Lancaster Industries." Ethan's eyes widened in shock. The name was legendary. Richard Lancaster had been one of the wealthiest businessmen in the country before he mysteriously disappeared years ago. But you're homeless," Ethan blurted. Lena's expression hardened. "Because my father's business partner betrayed him. My family lost everything overnight. My parents died soon after, and I was left to fend for myself. She tilted her head slightly. Tell me, Ethan, if you had known my last name before the wedding, would you have still treated me like a joke? Ethan opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. She stepped closer, her piercing gaze locking onto his. I accepted your proposal, not because I was desperate, but because I wanted to see what kind of man you were. And you didn't disappoint. You proved exactly what I suspected. You judge people by their appearances, their status, their wealth. You never even tried to see me for who I really am. Ethan felt his grip on the glass tighten. He had never felt this out of control before. What do you want? He asked, his voice strained. Lena smiled again, this time with amusement. I don't want anything from you, Ethan. In fact, I have something for you. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a document. Ethan took it hesitantly, his eyes scanning the words. His heart stopped. It was a legal contract, an annulment, effective immediately. You can keep your bet money, Lena said casually. I don't need it. And as of this moment, our marriage is over. Ethan's head snapped up. Wait. But she was already walking towards the door. As she reached for the handle, she turned to look at him one last time. Her eyes, now filled with quiet strength, locked onto his, and for the first time in his life, Ethan felt truly small. I hope one day you realize that money doesn't make a person valuable, and that betting on people's dignity will always cost you more than you're willing to pay. Her words sliced through the air like a final verdict. Ethan opened his mouth, wanting to say something, anything, but for once, he had no clever remark, no smug retort. He had won the bet, but somehow, he had never felt more like a loser. Lena's fingers tightened around the door handle, and she hesitated for just a second. Not out of regret, no, there was none of that, but as if giving him one last moment to let everything sink in. And then, without another word, she stepped out and closed the door behind her. Ethan sat frozen, staring at the empty space where she had stood. The silence in the room was deafening, heavier than it had ever been. His whiskey glass sat untouched, his once victorious smirk completely wiped from his face. He had spent his entire life believing that money gave him power over people. But tonight, he realized something far more terrifying. He had no power at all. Not over Lena. Not over this moment. And certainly not over the regret that was now creeping into his chest. With that, she walked out, leaving Ethan alone in the lavish suite. For the first time in his life, he wasn't the one laughing.